I don't want to coexist. Not like good guys and bad guys and true lies and propaganda. Put on blackface as cab drivers or deli owners in your racist comedies. Not bomb your Dunkin' Donuts with my keffiyeh. Fist pound Fox News or let you steal my food and call it Israeli salad. I won't mess with the Zohan or let them turn the rocks of Palestinian children into balloon animals while Israeli soldiers snipe our children's head, shoulders, knees, and stomachs. Hollywood snipes years of young ones with lovable tales of blue and white heroes. I'm not looking for your approval, not a token roll or job on my knees scrubbing toilets in Israel's Congress. I'd rather fight with blacks and Latinos against oppression than concede to a mainstream plantation that sees me as other unless I'm checking a college application. I don't believe in the tooth fairy or 2,000 claims of homes you supposedly deserved when people resurrected and walked on water. I'll exist. That fights against racism like Martin and Malcolm, bleeds ghetto tales of Stephen Biko as a song that never dies, no matter what apartheid makes of our bodies, feeds mouths and Belfast streets, and resurrects Bobby Sands' message so that we'll never be hungry again. And whether you know it or not, I'm the best solution you have. One man asking for one vote, turning to look at the sea, and I'll never drive you into it. I'll never return the favor. I'm not outstretching an olive branch and a rifle. I'm extending reality, because being surrounded by so-called enemies on your borders is easier than in your towns and election centers. We may not be brothers, but this neighborhood has made us cousins. I don't want to coexist. I want to exist as a human being, and justice will take care of the rest. My first experience was through my teta, through my grandmother's stories, through what she went through and her dispossession. And my grandmother was 7 months pregnant with my mother when they were kicked out of Palestine, and my father was 2 years old when they fled on his side of the family. So this new poem I'm going to try to do is called Mockba, and I'm working on a lot of new material. And you know, when I taught in Palestine, spoken word is a lot like group therapy. You're kind of digging deep down and pulling things out that that society sometimes tells you not to. So whether it's teaching or whether it's viewing brilliant artwork, for me the art scene provides a lot, not just in terms of the culture and the art, but as a catalyst for activism. So it's nice to be part of this brilliant community of Palestinian artists, and this is called Mockba. She was scared. 7 months pregnant. Guns pointed at temples, tears dropping, stomach cusped, back bent, dirt pathways leading to dispossession. Rocking boats, waves crashing, people rushing, falling over each other, packing into small spaces like memories. Her home, mandated, occupied, cleansed, conquer. Terrorizer sat on hills, sniping children carrying school books. Neighbors fled on April 10th. Word came of massacre. They stayed, didn't fight, didn't leave. Shells and bombs bursting in air like anthems, prayed for the dead with priests and imams, prayed for the living looking over shoulders for the Irgun and Haganah. She's a warrior, raised life, planted trees, painted fruit, cared for the road as if it was her garden. Orphaned twice. At birth, from Palestine. Whispered Yafa till final breath, never knew essence until she found emptiness. 48 ways to flee and she found Beirut. Bullet holes in buildings, reminder of home, but not home. Years later, daughter sat on hills in the south, dreaming of breaking water never touched, thinks of their mother, that warrior, how battles still rage here and abroad. Orchards flourished. Propagandists called them barren, land expropriated for Europeans who called religion, ethnicity, colonist, non-native, foreigner, not from here. Plant flags, call it home, rename cities and villages, uprooting graveyards, wiping, cleaning, cleansing memory that this is not theirs. Passed away, August 22nd, 2009. Frail hands shook, lip trembled, didn't want to die, but suffered decades. She will speak Arabic, broken English, wounded words and murmurs, her eyes close, but every so often they blink brilliance, memories that cannot be erased, uprooted, or cleansed. She has not forgotten. We have not forgotten. We will not forget. Veins like roots of olive trees we will return. That is not a threat, not a wish, not a hope, not a dream, but a promise. So this is called the do's and don'ts of Palestine, and this is kind of a tutorial on what you are and are not allowed to say. This is sarcastic, so please do not write these rules down and then go use them in the street and then be like, Remi Kanazi told me to. So this is called the do's and don'ts of Palestine. Don't call it genocide. We don't want to offend anyone. If we offend them, they'll never listen to us. We have to be reasonable. 1,400, just a number. No names, no death. We want peace and negotiations. Don't mention Zionism. If you mention Zionism, they're going to call you anti-Semitic, and people will believe them. Don't cite Palestinian sources. No one would believe you. I wouldn't believe you. Trust Israeli sources. Don't ever be angry. Oh, hi, Arab. If you're angry, they're going to call you angry. Hello, white person. If you're angry, everyone's going to call you understandably emotional. We have to be pragmatic. Pragmatism is not a euphemism for concessions, although it may feel that way. This one goes out to you too. Don't mention Allah or martyrs. It reminds them of Al-Qaeda and 9/11. It's not your job to actually fix their ignorance. Don't talk about silly things like refugees, boycott, or the one-state solution. If we want to win, we have to compromise. The road to peace is just ahead. Don't. Whatever you do, this goes out to everyone. Whatever you do, don't make analogies that include the Holocaust, Nazis, or the Warsaw Ghetto. Only Israelis are allowed to do this while discussing wars on Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. Don't talk about Haifa, Jaffa, Safed, or where your family's from. But if you do, nod when random people say they love Israel. Doesn't matter where you came from, you can't actually go back. Don't, just don't, and that will lead to doing. And this is called home. And I grew up in a small town in western Massachusetts. My father was a doctor. I didn't have to fight financially for anything in my life. And, you know, some people will say, well, you know, you had this upbringing, why would you care? And for me, it was, I learned about Palestine through the civil rights movement, through the anti-apartheid struggle, and it made me want to work twice as hard, you know? And the issue for me is about freedom, justice, and equality for all people, not necessarily just my family's story, just one people. It's not about nationalism or a flag, but about a system of oppression. So this is called Home, and it's an identity piece about me growing up in Western Mass. I didn't grow up in a refugee camp. I grew up here, comfortable, able not to know or care, choose my own destination, close the book, turn off the TV, forget the stories. A gay man once asked me, why do you give a damn about Palestine? Why not, I replied. Why did men and women clench fists and fight back the Stonewall, push through Matthew Shepard hate crime legislation in Congress? I care about Palestine for the same reason I get emotional watching Schindler's List. Still can't comprehend why kids in my neighborhood picked on Michael Paul just because he was Jewish, was 10 years old the first time someone called me a sand nigger. And I don't hate the town I grew up in, but I don't forget those experiences either. The way white women on the block talk down to my brown mother. Don't forget the stories. Pretend it didn't happen. Don't feel the need to dream up an alternative American childhood, as if its vision ever intended to include me. People fight back because they identify. My grandmother still fills tear ducts with longing memories of Jaffa, a home we in America take for granted. I don't ask anyone to forget about the Holocaust or feel as Jewish because they grew up on Long Island. Not going to have someone tell me where my loyalties lie because my physical environment should define who I am. Remembrance. It's part of action, never again applies to many peoples. Yes, I'm a product of America, but no less Palestinian. Palestine being that fight for freedom and justice, not just low valleys, beautiful sunsets, and fig trees, not just my grandparents' house in Jaffa that's still standing, not just a place I nervously visited. I could barely catch a cab in Arabic, yet welcomed like they were expecting my return. Home, in the realest sense. I'm Palestinian. I was born in America. That is who I am. You were told, no. Stop complaining, keep your head down, walk forward, smile when spoken to. This is just how things are. It could be worse, it could be over there, it could be back the way it was, but it can't be what you're thinking. They're too powerful, too brutal, too supported by the West, Saudi, Israel, brokered deals to keep you down and your resources out cheap. Don't stand up, resist, reject, must respect status quos that keep you imprisoned, your outspoken tortured, your economy pillaged. In the US, moderates reinforced propaganda, working within a system that worked them into nicer houses, brought them $100,000 galas and one-on-ones with war criminals who'll be written about in the next edition of a people's history. The youth rose up, labor spoke up, pessimists, former pan-Arabists and pragmatists, they took the squares, took over squares, chanting down with Ben Ali, down with Mubarak, down with the regime, rewriting conventional wisdom with the dreamer's pen. It is not too late. We are not free enough. He may be better than his father, but less evil is still evil. Ruled, squashed, pummeled, broken, backed up against walls, skull smashed, repainting sidewalks, stabbed in squares, hung in courtyards. Keep your head down. It's no longer a solution. From Tahrir to Nabi Saleh, people are redefining authority by asserting communities as leaders. We are the future. That's not a campaign slogan, but a lifestyle that sees snapping fists as a catalyst to resistance, shaking off rulers, corrupt Arab neighbors, leagues of dictators, U.S. imperialism, Israeli hegemony, and old guard dog egos who are bruised by their failures. Revolution, it doesn't come easy. Much of the world is looking at you and working against you. Remember that. But you are a people's movement. Your resolve is a revolution. Much of the world is standing with you. Remember that. Included in the book are 48 three-line poems for Palestine, and they're split up into 4 different sections, each one to signify one of my displaced grandparents in 1948. So I'm going to read a few of them, just a short section, and then I'll end with a passionate piece or so. He lifted up his shirt, showed me 2 bullets that pierced his shoulder, lifted up his pant leg, showed me where a tear gas shattered his kneecap, never touched a gun or picked up a rock. His loud voice, more powerful than any cannon. The soldier stroked his gun as he looked at the young girl, raped her with his eyes, occupied every part of her being. She said nothing, stared at the ground, and kept walking. One more checkpoint until she's home. In Gaza, an Israeli soldier remains in prison. The world knows his name and the conditions to set him free. 7,700 Palestinians wallow in Israeli dungeons. The world cannot mention their names because they never bothered to learn them. A pregnant woman dies at a checkpoint. Sometimes a hand in the face is as powerful as a pistol. I don't know if anybody remembers, in 2006 there was an iconic image during the massacre on Lebanon where there were two Israeli girls writing on missiles that said "with love." Those missiles were then used against the civilian population of Lebanon, and this is what this piece is about. Missiles said "with love." I fall to where they hit. Charred limbs, stained tears, rotting corpses. No love in sight. She closes her eyes, smells the sea salt, takes in a deep breath, feels the wind hug her arms as her father once did. For a split second, she imagines they've returned, where she was born, where she belongs. This is an important piece for me to do because we live in a country that has spent trillions of dollars on war and never actually end up talking about what those wars have done to people. You have essentially the same amount of people that were killed in Fallujah that died on 9/11. I was living in New York City on 9/11, and I never hear people talk about it. There's this kind of feeling like the war in Iraq is over. The war in Afghanistan doesn't matter. What's going on in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, I mean, that's so far, that's so over there. And there's also this kind of feeling like, I was living in New York City on 9/11, and it's like half the people thought I was like Italian or Latino, and then like the other half were like, oh, okay, he's Arab. And so I heard a lot of racist and vitriolic stuff, like that kind of like, we got to go and turn that place into a parking lot. We need to go and nuke them and start over. And it wasn't coming from the right-wing Ann Coulter types. It was coming from the kids in my neighborhood. And I didn't have a positive way to react to that kind of feeling. And after 9/11, there was the systematic dehumanization of the Arab and Muslim male. And it's something that happened long before in this country to the black and Latino male. And there's this idea that if 1,000 people die in Afghanistan tomorrow, it doesn't matter because they were in the Taliban, or their cousin was in the Taliban, or they were friends with the Taliban, or one time they saw this YouTube video and it said Taliban on it, so we had the right to kill 1,000 people. And this idea of any person that is in a zone where Barack Obama is now bombing, that male is considered a, quote, combatant. So this is called Before the Machetes Are Raised. I'm disgusted by terrorism. Backwards animals who have no value for human life produce propaganda videos to disseminate their message, prey on the weakest in society, infect children, recruit fighters, like expendable ants in our ideological struggle. You know who I'm talking about. Soldiers who drop bunker-busting bombs on mosques and university, decry the Middle East, but follow authority closer than dictatorial rule, think stripes and codes rather than decency and humanity give them worth in this world. I've seen one too many Facebook invites by jingoistic kids I went to high school and grade school with. They couldn't wait to get in some trigger time, hunt down towelheads and hajis like venison. And once a Marine's grenade launcher catapults 120 mini bombs per minute, takes out 17 houses and 14 schoolgirls, I'm supposed to feel bad that he can't see his wife and daughter on Christmas. Respect his service. When he comes back to the States, a murderer who destroyed a country full of daughters and wives that'll never see Eid. We're so quick to honor the troops, but don't dare mention the widows. The trembling father crying, immersed in his wife's charred flesh, a fetus blown out of her stomach. The soldier said, kicking down the door was too risky. Where's the love for the 25-year-old Iraqi man whose car was riddled with American-made bullets, pained face and surprised look like grabbing for sky, falling at 110-story towers? As long as we don't affect our interests, we'll shout out Darfur, Rwanda, and the need for antiretrovirals. Look at people's aid packages who can't compete, rather than ravaged lands perfecting paradigms of imperialism and propaganda. Where's that right-wing Zionist trying to save the Congo? Combating Lev Leviev in Angola, genocide, and northern Uganda? Where's the humanity before the machetes are raised and proxy forces put into place? King, Mandela, and Gandhi aren't meant to be easy reference platitudes to make you feel better at night, help you forget that uncomfortable poem Americans don't want to face. We'll worship American idols, but have no value for human life. And yet all I hear are 20-somethings telling me they just aren't into politics. I wonder what they'd say at their parents' eulogy. After they were blown up into 386 different pieces, I'm sure they wouldn't discuss things, because politics isn't their thing. Politics isn't our thing. While we reach out for freedom and justice, we're defined as political. To undermine our suffering, create notions of two-side and equal conflict, cover up our dispossession, and burn down villages, we're political. So you can ignore us, delegitimize and forget us. But we're human beings gracing the window pane, reflecting stillborn images. We're voices chiming in choirs and temples. We're life that won't be forgotten. We're here, and we won't go away. We're the world's shiver. It's cold out here. And whether you like it or not, we're coming inside. So this is called, and I'm going to end with this, called "This Poem Will Not End Apartheid." And for me, it's important to talk about the situation. It's important to advocate, but it's most important for us to act. And we were having an awesome conversation before, whether it's reshaping and changing the media landscape in our country, or me talking to the kids that I grew up with in Western Massachusetts, or being involved with BDS, we can do something about it. For me, talking about Palestine isn't symbolic. You know, talking about ideals of freedom, justice, and equality isn't, you know, something that we should just talk about. It's something that we should be realizing. And I do think that that's possible. And one of the greatest things that an anti-apartheid activist from South Africa said to me was that on the eve of the fall of apartheid, if you told us that apartheid would fall the next day, we would have laughed in your faces. So the reality is that change does happen. We are on the right side of history. We have nothing to be ashamed of. And every day in this country, through coalition building, through allies, through work on college campuses, there's a lot of college students here today, through working through your churches and your synagogues and your mosques, with working in your local community, the pension fund, it's all helping. And that's how it happened in South Africa. And for our struggle, it's a longer climb. It's a steeper climb. But for me, I do think it will happen if enough people come together. And not to be cliche about it, but like those, you know, we sometimes feel like we're 1 against 300 million, constantly pounding against a brick wall. But I do think that those small steps eventually create a big wave. This poem will not end apartheid. My words, no matter how beautiful, clever, or carefully strung together, will not end the occupation, allow the refugees to return, or create equality within Israeli society. The status quo, it's a fantasy, telling us it's okay to sit on our hands, called political art propaganda, rather than those who politicize our lives, propagandists. Every American should ask themselves this question: why are bombs and white phosphorus getting dropped on open-air prisons with money that should be going to pay for your medical expenses? And dear academics and leftists, I appreciate your books on Israeli massacres, but you refuse to take the bullets out of IDF guns with your stances. The problem, it's not just the occupation or putting a better face on Zionism, because 750,000 Palestinians were displaced before those settlements were constructed, half of them before Israel was created. We don't need another book explaining the situation. We need a lesson plan. Stop the next bomb from dropping. Silence is complicity. Over-intellectualization tells us to theorize on the power of art, while farmers are kicked off land, children are stolen on the way to school, people are caged and beaten and split from loved ones, bombed and broken in open-air prisons, bought and paid for with our tax dollars. We're part of the problem. That's not theoretical. I don't want to hug a segregationist, wave to at a separate water fountain, or appeal to from the back of the bus. A day will come, I swear to you all, when Zionists cower in embarrassment, deny involvement like those who profited off of Stephen Biko's lifeless body and Bobby Sands' empty stomach. So yes, I'm going to boycott all Israeli products and go to the root of the conflict, because settlements are just the branches of the Zionist program. Every 729 cultural institution and dialogue farce, from Sabra to Ahava, Max Brenner to Aroma, Lev Leviv and Motorola, signing a 2-year contract stacks up little to 63 years of continued ethnic cleansing. Finally, to all you artists, building bridges between apartheid and normalization, you serve an agenda which rebrands colonialism as enlightenment. Concerts, ballets, and raves in Israel's Sun City, a haven and party stop for pinkwashers who callously ignore Palestinian LGBT groups fighting against all systems of oppression. Palestinian civil society has spoken. Don't cross his picket line or cash in that paycheck signed apartheid. Put down stolen beauty, cancel that gig, and join the rest of us on the right side of history.